Better side?
That's up to you. What do you think?
I hit in the face for a living.
Thank God I got married before I really started fighting some tough dudes.
So, hey, let's talk about your last fight, man. There's a big win over a tough guy. Put you right where you needed to be. Right within striking distance of another shot. How'd it feel walking out of there with the win over Brown?
I felt great. Brown's a tough dude. He really is. He's been in there with some of the best, and he always ends up finishing the fight. And I knew that going into that fight. That's why I sort of went a different route. Once I got the first takedown, I knew that he was dangerous on the ground. So sort of felt good to stay on top of somebody instead of just letting them back up, scoring some points there, which is always a confidence booster. And so you got to take it like that, Like I said, he's a tough dude. I'm very happy to be able to fight in Dallas and walk out with another win.
And let's talk about that. It seemed you got a little bit of criticism about that, but in a sense, you were going back to where a lot of people thought that was the strongest part of your game. Is mixing in your wrestling and then throwing in the power. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with you being the most efficient Johny Hendricks you can be?
Exactly, and that's what we sort of got to is that we I want to put on a show for the fans, but I also have to win. Look where that got me.
Yeah.
You put on a show for the fans and you end up losing. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I'm definitely going to get back to whatever I win at. And, it does mix things up. It does make things where, you're sitting there and it makes you unpredictable. And then you can actually throw harder and you can get people to, be more offensive and worried about certain things. So I think it's going to play into my game really well.
Did it make you shrug your shoulders a little bit, afterwards, because we see a lot of times, we see guys that say they're wrestlers, but they fall in love with their power, and they never go back to their wrestling, okay? You went back to your wrestling, like I said, the most efficient Johny Hendricks we've seen, and did you kind of shrug your shoulders with, what's this brushback coming? I fought a great fight over a tough guy, and I got a victory.
Yeah, and that's it, is that you got to sit there, and sometimes, the fans are very hard to please, and you just got to accept that, and sometimes you just sit there and say, man, I did my best, and my best was that little style, and I had to do it, and I won. And maybe the next one I can mix it up a little bit better, and it's you got to constantly adapt. You can't sit there and say, okay, I'm just going to be a striker. Well, I fell into that. Just a striker. I started outpointing everybody, but sometimes you don't get the win. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I outpointed a lot of people in the last couple of fights, and you don't win them. So, what wins the fights? Well, whenever you can hold somebody down and punch them a bunch and do those kind of things, well, that is definitely a good notch under your belt. And if it goes to a decision, nice to have under your belt as well.
That's one of the most talent-filled divisions in the UFC. It's kind of crazy. Where do you see movement happening?
I see movement happen, after this January fight. See what happens, and then see where I lay. You know what I mean? I'm sort of gonna, We talked about it, thought about it, and I might take a fight, I might not. You know what I mean? We're still weighing things out. We're gonna see where we fall and see what happens. But right now, I see myself as a number one contender, and I took a fight, and guess what? It took a belt away from me, a belt opportunity. I had a shot at the belt, and Roy McDonald had a fight. And so I was like, man, I don't want one of them to jump over me. So I took a fight. That fight ended up not happening. It cost me a title shot.
But you talk about when you get injured and then you continue to keep fighting. Do you think maybe you didn't take breaks long enough in between injuries? Did that make you more apprehensive and then fight more for points? Or was there anything that maybe kind of pulled Johny Hendricks back a little bit?
Yeah, the bicep wasn't 100% yet whenever I took that last fight. But, I thought it was. You know what I mean? You don't know until you get into combat situations. You know what I mean? Just like you don't know if a guy's going to fight or flight when a bullet whizzes by you. It's sort of the same thing. You could sit there and say, oh, yeah, it feels awesome. You get in there, and it doesn't feel like it should. But, again, it's a learning curve. You just sit there and that's what we worked on, and it ended up coming back strong.
Because I wonder about that, because some of these guys are just so phenomenal, but I don't know if sports science has caught up with the demands of the MMA athlete yet.
Has it? Realistically, all that boils down to your mind. I mean, in my mind, I believed I was ready. I believed I was 100%. And I've wrestled through a lot of things. I've been through a lot of things in my life, and in those things, I've always been able to push through it. I was able to push through that one too. It just didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. Everything's a learning curve. So what you do is you sit there and say, okay, it didn't work out the way you wanted it to. Then you come back and you come back stronger.
Can you talk about your diet and weight now between fights?
My diet and stuff between fights is don't eat a whole piece of pizza. Eat a little bit of it. So I'm still on my diet. I'm walking around instead of blowing up to 220. I'm at 202, 203 right now. I've been lifting weights for the last month now. I've got back into the gym. I'm trying to fix up some holes, stuff like that. So, I'm feeling better about that. Even at training at 202, I feel better. 100% better than I did at 220. I'm not as fat, so I'm actually able to do more stuff. I'm actually able to lift, and and that's something that we got away from for about 3 years. We didn't lift at all because I was always stronger than everybody else, and then everybody else sort of caught up to me, and now I'm lifting again. So, I feel strong again. I feel good. Now it's just mixing it all together to get 100% Johny in the octagon every fight.
How's your arm?
My arm is feeling good. Benching, doing one arm benches and stuff like that, dumbbells, all that. It's right there with my left arm. It's feeling great now. Finally, it took me a little while to get it back, but it's there now. There's still little tweaks here and there, but nothing that you feel in a fight.
Johny, obviously you want whoever's got the belt next, but aside from that, who else in the division would you like to take on? Who would make a good fight?
I don't really care. So let's say that Roy McDonald beats Lawler and it's a really close fight and it goes into they do a rematch, right? Well, then whoever Dana White sends my way, then that's who we're going to fight.
CM Punk, you'd be like, yeah, let's do it.
CM Punk, yeah. If it was him, then yeah, I would do it. That'd be a weird jump for him, to jump to the number one contender. But if that happened, then and Dana White thought that was a smart move to put him in there with me, then we would do it.
Would you take a last minute fight at like 185?
A last minute fight? Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me, boy. If I'm training, which I am now, and say something like that did happen, I wouldn't put it past me,
Because that's kind of a worry when you're at that top 10 spot. There's not a lot of fights that make sense for you. But people getting injured and people already having fights, something falls through, you could be sitting for a while waiting.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is so let's say I do wait until November, December, which for the last 3 years, that's nothing for me, right? That's what I've been fighting, March and December, March and November, March and December. So it's not really a big wait for me. So if something does happen, if I do make that move, I'm making it for permanent. Does that make sense? But if something like that does come my way and they're like, hey, we'd love to see you at 85, then, me not making 170 be all right with me.
When you first started, were there fighters that you would want to emulate or anyone you wanted to be like?
Yeah, the two greatest ones I can think of were I loved Chuck Liddell's style, and I loved Randy Couture's style. Those two were the sort of Chuck Liddell was the guy that, I'm just going to punch you in the face. Randy Couture was the guy that's he had a game plans, and his game plans, he was going to stick to it no matter what happened, right? And I watched these guys, and I got to meet these guys, and they were very nice and very casual to a nobody. You know what I mean? And so that right there, that's sort of what I mimicked after is, take two of the greats, merge their styles together, and be like, be as close as you can to the way they were with the fans, they were with me, and that's what I've tried to give back.
Was that one of the reasons that you started Extreme Couture?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons because Randy went to Oklahoma State, and Randy gave us our opportunity to go in there and train. So I was actually really excited about that, and I give him a lot of credit and thanks for jump starting my career.
Are you gonna watch May and Pac?
Am I gonna watch that fight? I haven't decided yet. I keep going back to. I wish it happened 3 years ago. If it happened 3 years ago, I would definitely pay it because Pacquiao and Mayweather, those were the two fighters, and they still are. And I think that's why they're trying to make a big push because boxing's sort of dying. Boxing's dying hard, and so whenever you get Pacquiao and Mayweather in that octagon or in the ring, it's gonna be a good fight. But Pacquiao's lost a couple here lately. and got knocked out one of them. So does he still have the chin? Can he, does he still have the power and all those kind of things to beat Mayweather? Don't know. And like I said, if it was 3 years ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. I'd been like buying it, But now, I don't know. I'm gonna see how the lead up and all that kind of stuff plays into factor.
John, is it true that you normally only shave your beard after a fight?
Yeah.
So the length of your beard right now represents how long you've been training?
Yeah. And my wife hates it, so guess what? And UFC, when I come to UFC events, so I grow it so people will actually know who I am. So that way it's not like, is that? No, you know what I mean? Like, they actually can, they can say that's Johny Hendricks, and it makes it easier for me because then I'm not sitting there going, and the guy's looking at you going, and you're like, he's not going to say nothing. And they're like, Johnny, and I'm like, oh, okay. So it makes it easier to interact with people.
Is it hard going from wrestling all the time to competing as not as frequently as you do now? Because as a college wrestler, you wrestle in there every weekend.
Yeah, you do.
And now you go these long distances.
It's not. It's actually easier because one, it's harder on the weight because you balloon up and your body doesn't get used to slamming up and down, right, or staying low all the time like in wrestling. Where here, you actually get to put on muscle, you get to build muscle, you get to get better technique instead of having to do the full season and learn all that stuff. That way, you actually get some time off to actually let your body recover too. Like I said, I've trained through a lot of injuries through wrestling because you didn't have time to take out. You know what I mean? You had to keep grinding through it. Where this, if you hurt something, let's say after my fight I broke my hand. Well, guess what? I have time to let it heal because I know I have time before my next fight.
And what is it about you? A lot of wrestlers, they kind of stay wrestling. They work their striking, and in the gym they look really good on striking. But like you said, fight or flight, people start punching you in the face, and all of a sudden they rely on wrestling. How did you build that confidence to not only excel at it, but knock people out in seconds?
I got knocked out. Okay, I got knocked out when I first started, and I woke up feeling awesome. I did. Felt like I slept for 3 days. It was a beautiful thing. Not on the knockout, but on the wake-up part. I was like, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. Everybody gets knocked out. Look at all these fights. You know what I mean? Everybody gets knocked out sooner or later, right? If it happens to you, it happens to you. So who cares? You know what I mean? If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, I can't go in there. It's like, if you go into combat, you can't sit there and say, is this my day to die or my day to get shot, right? You got to sit there and act like I'm untouchable, and if it happens, it happens. But you can't do that or you're never going to be able to take that first step off the vehicle or the first step to move forward. And that's sort of the way that I look at my fighting, is that if I look at that and I think of that, I can't take that first step forward and I'll be hesitating all the time. And then that's really the bad part, and that's when it can happen. Perfect?
Yeah.